Fidelity, one of the best companies that you can decide to go with to build your investment portfolio that would take you to that millionaire status a lot quicker. However, Fidelity absolutely crushed the investment world when they decided to introduce the very first zero expense ratio index funds. And let me tell you, it was a huge success. So much so that it brought you to this video in wondering, number one, should I even invest in the Fidelity Zero Index funds? And number two, how do I build a good solid portfolio using these zero index funds? Well, do not worry, my friends, I have you covered. What is going on, everyone? My name is Trey, and welcome to the best channel that is intended to help you get out of debt, stay out of debt, reach financial independence so that you can begin your millionaire journey. And if that sounds like something that you might be interested in, please do not hesitate for another second and go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Now, even though Fidelity's index funds were already some of the very best and low expense ratioed funds that you can invest in, Fidelity decided to take it a step further in introducing the zero funds. So let's go ahead and jump into it. There were four particular funds. The first fund is Fidelity Zero Total Market Index Fund. The second fund, Fidelity Zero Large Cap Index Fund. The third fund, Fidelity Zero Extended Market Index Fund. And last but not least, Fidelity's International Index Fund. Now, so for those of you who want a more concrete breakdown of some Fidelity index funds that you should be looking at, I went over it in this video. So be sure to check that one out after this one. Here's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be breaking down these particular funds. Then additionally, I'm going to give you my choices in order to build a solid, complete, diversified fund only using Fidelity's zero funds. Then I'm going to give you pros and cons on these zero funds. If you're asking a more in-depth question, and that being, how do I choose the correct index fund? In this video, I actually went over that. So be sure to check that one out after this one. You're going to try and build a portfolio. So there's two main things that you need to be focused on, and I've said it in previous videos. And those things are diversification, which is then going to lead you to asset allocation. Diversification, to make it very simple and plain, means not putting all of your eggs in one basket. In this particular instance, what we're referring to is not putting all of your investment funds into one particular fund, which leaves so much room for growth. So for instance, I give you a perfect example. You have some individuals that say, hey, I only want to and I only invest in an S&P 500 index fund, arguably the most popular index fund of all. But because the fact that it only invests in 500 of the largest companies within the United States, that would then beg the question, well, what about those small and mid-sized companies that you're missing out on? So what you would want to do is diversify your portfolio by including these small and mid-cap companies. And the way that you would do so is by investing in something like a total stock market index fund. Now, a total stock market index fund is going to include these 500 large cap companies, but it's also going to include those ever so important small as well as mid-sized companies. Now, in previous videos, I've mentioned this example, but just to hit it home for you, Tesla at one point was actually a small then a mid-sized company. As we know now, it has joined the S&P 500 and is now considered to be one of the largest, most successful companies within the United States. So the growth that you would miss out on, or that you did miss out on if you weren't already invested in Tesla, from small company to mid-sized company to now a large successful company, that's a lot of money that you potentially missed out on. So the name of the game is to diversify your portfolio so that you do not miss out. This is next going to lead us into asset allocation. Asset allocation should be something that you're looking into before you even invest in an index fund, or any fund for that matter. The reason being, you need to know how much of your funds are going to go into stocks and how much of those are going to go into bonds. Let's say, for an example, you have $6,000. 3,000 of it you're investing into stocks. The other 3,000 of it you're investing into bonds. Well, your asset allocation at that point would be 50% stock, 50% bonds. A lot of people will have the question, how do I choose my asset allocation? I go by a very simple rule. It has worked for me for years, and I would imagine it will work for you as well. So I take my age and subtract it from 110. All right, now this number will vary in certain instances. Some people say 100, some say 110, some say 120. The number will probably continually go up as we start dealing with inflation and the market, but I generally and continue to use the number 110. So if you subtract your age from 110, the number that you have left over is ideally the percentage of stocks that you should be invested in. So for an example, if you're 30 years old and you subtract 30 from 110, that would leave you with 80%. So you should be 80% invested in stocks, 20% invested in bonds. All right, so this is a number that you need to determine before you even go into investing. With all of that being said, let's go into the breakdown of Fidelity's Zero Funds. Starting with number one, Fidelity's Total Market Index Fund. The ticker symbol for this one obviously is FZROX. It is designed to mirror funds such as Vanguard's Total Stock Market Index Fund, or VTSAX. Now, this particular fund is going to invest in all U.S. companies that are currently on the market, with the exception of a couple. So companies with less than 75 million per capita, or we call it nano companies. So it's kind of doing you the favor by washing out some of these companies that don't have a larger portfolio, but it does invest in over 2,500 companies collectively, to include those that are in the S&P 500. I am a huge supporter of a total stock market index fund. To me, the decision is very simple, although there are other ways that you can extend out your portfolio, but to me, it's the simplest way to gain exposure to the entire US market. Those large, mid, as well as small cap companies, in order to be fully diversified. And that's what you have here and Fidelity Zero Total Market Index Fund. Our next fund, and that is Fidelity Zero Large Cap Index Fund. Now, ticker symbol FNILX. This one is designed to mirror the S&P 500. So 500 of the most successful companies in the United States, or we would just call it large cap companies. The reason that you don't see the term S&P 500 in the name is simply for licensing issues, which I felt that Fidelity was smart in that realm and wanting to save money and not pay for those licensing fees to just solely be able to use the name. But make no mistake, this fund is an S&P 500 fund, all right? And invests in 500 of the largest US companies and also the most successful. The next fund is going to be Fidelity Zero International Index Fund. Ticker symbol FZILX. Of late, I think that conversation in terms of whether you should or you shouldn't invest in international funds has become a little bit complicated, but it all is going to come down to your personal investment strategy. Whether you do or whether you do not decide to invest in it, well, Fidelity decided to give you a no-fee fund regardless. So this particular fund is going to give you the ability to invest in the most successful and valuable companies abroad. In total, it's going to include 47 countries. So some of these countries are going to be developing countries. Some will be developed countries like Japan or Brazil. It gives you furthermore exposure to the market to furthermore allow you to diversify your portfolio. Last but not least, Fidelity Zero Extended Market Index Fund. Ticker symbol FZIPX. The reason that this one is so critical is because it actually gives you exposure to those small and mid-cap companies that the S&P 500 or the large cap fund does not include. So this particular fund is going to put you in investments of just over 2,000 companies. Now here's the funny thing about this particular fund. If you add this one with Fidelity's Large Cap Index Fund, it actually mirrors and creates Fidelity's Total Market Index Fund. Let's go into the pros of investing in these zero funds. Now, the biggest one obviously is the fact being that there are zero fees. Fees are something that's very critical in your ability to amass a large, comfortable nest egg in your retirement or investment account. As we know, actively managed funds charge exuberant and ridiculous amounts of fees. In this particular instance, being that you are a passive investor, you want to stay away from those fees as much as possible. And that is what Fidelity has done here for you. The second pro is that you can actually replicate your current portfolio if you've already decided to invest with Fidelity. So let's say, for instance, if you already had FXAIX, FNILX can very easily replicate that fund, which will then lead us to another question. I know that it's coming, and that question is, well, if it's almost the same, why would I invest in one over the other? Why wouldn't I just choose FXAIX as opposed to choosing FNILX, which is a great question, but it all comes down to, are those fees important enough to you to invest in? Hypothetically, I don't think that the differences between 0.06% and 0% are that huge. If you're investing, I'm throwing a number out, like $10,000 and the fee is gonna be like 10 bucks, it's not enough for me to decide, hey, I need to come out of this and invest in these funds. However, that does not take away from the fact being that if you have not already started investing in these funds, that these are great funds for you to go into, which now takes us into some of the cons. Now, the biggest con that I would say, and I think I've heard other individuals say this as well, are tracking errors. All right, it's not something that's very often spoke about. It does exist, and a tracking error is basically, well, you have an index, like an index fund that's designed to track a particular index, but it doesn't report very accurately for that particular period its returns. It's reporting that it returned X amount, but it actually returned X amount, all right? So that difference is going to be made up in fees. A lot of the times these differences are very minimal. So it's not something that you need to be extremely concerned about, but something that you need to pay attention to. The last con that I would say is something that is very important for those individuals who decide to invest in bonds. If you decided to go with some of these funds to build a portfolio and you were absolutely dead set on investing in bonds as well, then you would have to invest in some of Fidelity's paid for bond index funds. Well, which one of these funds should I put into a portfolio to be diverse and to build that millionaire status quicker? Obviously, because I am a huge proponent for a total market index fund, I would invest in two of these funds. Number one being FZROX, Fidelity's Total Market Index Fund. And for a very simple reason, it is supremely diversified, all right? You don't want to leave out any of those small and mid-cap companies so that you don't get Tesla'd. But also, I would add FZILX, Fidelity Zero International Index Fund. And the reason being is you don't want to miss out on that international exposure either. I know a lot of people are going to ask these questions, well, aren't some of those companies that's in the 500 already investing abroad? The answer is yes. However, you don't want to miss out on any of that potential growth. At the end of the day, these zero expense ratio funds from Fidelity are great funds for you to start investing in so that you can build a comfortable nest egg in retirement. If you found this video to be insightful in any way, please go ahead and subscribe so that I can continue going to get those buy one, get one donuts from Food Lion. Can you believe that? 12 donuts for $1.99. If you like the video, don't forget to gently tap the like button for the YouTube algorithm. I would greatly appreciate it. Lastly, I want to thank all of the men and women who have served and who continue to serve this wonderful country of ours. I appreciate you all. So until the next video, let's talk finances then.